Hi, and welcome to Telepathic TV. This is television you watch with your third eye. I'm Neville-Johnston.
And I'm Mary Phelan, and our program's about raising our
Sort of consciousness. Please go ahead and introduce our...
And tonight we're having a special show, and the topic is on near-death experiences. And we've got two very special guests with us tonight. One is going to be on the phone, and one is here in the studio. And let me introduce our very special Reverend Mary Myers, that's with us in the studio tonight, of Arlington Metaphysical Chapel. And she is here to talk about promoting an event that she's going to be sponsoring on March 5th, is it?
Yes.
And it's on near-death experiences with Dr. Pam Kircher, who will be on the phone shortly.
Yes, very good, very good. I have not met Dr. Kircher yet, and we have talked on the phone, but I'm delighted to have a conversation with her here on the air.
Yes,
so,
yeah. That's wonderful. So now this is all part of a larger thing that you're going to be doing once a year, bringing consciousness to the area.
Yes, Arlington Metaphysical Chapel, located on Wilson Boulevard, 5618 Wilson Boulevard, with Reverend F. Reed Brown as the head pastor, is a interfaith denomination, small denomination, and we are very much focused on the philosophy that the personality does not end after the change most people would call death, and that our personal identity does go on, and it is recognizable, and it still has work to do. And so that is our ministry. I was a Methodist minister, and actually the assistant pastor at Clarendon United Methodist Church here in Arlington.
Oh, wow.
And I just, when I look back, I feel that Spirit has just drawn me forward and into a more expansive, more holistic kind of ministry. But back to the point of what our event is going to be about. This is the first of an annual event that we are going to involve our ministry with, not in a theological or denominationally strong voice, but this event is geared toward the fact that it can clinically be shown and demonstrated now that the personal identity does not stop. Most Orthodox denominations talk about life everlasting and that life does go on, but then they have a certain dogma or certain doctrine about that. Dr. Kircher's approach is going to be more on a professional medical level, and that's who we're appealing to with this group, this presentation. The hospice groups, palliative care groups, nursing, medical, seminaries, and chaplaincy work all will have to help deal with people. Almost, if I understand Dr. Kircher's percentages right, statistics, almost 43% of, I suppose you could say, world population, if it's national population, have...
Oh, and speaking of, here she is. Hello, Dr. Kircher.
Yes, hello.
Hi. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We were just talking about you and just introducing you. Dr. Kircher is from Durango, Colorado, and she's going to be coming here on March 5th to do a talk, which we will give details to later and give you the phone number and how you can get tickets to attend. And Dr. Kircher is a really interesting history. I've been looking at your website and all the different things you do. My first question will be, do you ever get any sleep? But you are a medical doctor, and you are also an expert on near-death experiences, and a Tai Chi practitioner, as well as a hospice advisor. So that must keep you pretty busy.
It does, and I love the variety of things I do.
Yeah, it's quite a variety. Yeah, well, what started you even being interested in near-death experiences?
Well, the first thing that started me in being interested was the fact that I actually had one when I was a 6-year-old child, although back then they didn't have a name for it. And it was really in the 1980s when I first began to read about near-death experiences and realized that my own experience as a child was in that category. So that certainly got me interested, and that was really the beginning of my reading and talking about it, was finding that there was actually a name for it and that other people had had a near-death experience as well.
Wow. Wow, and I think that people don't know how many people, I mean, if we actually got statistics, it'll be surprising how many people have actually had death experiences, Neville being one of them, which we'll talk in a little while about yours, because it is just phenomenal. Because most people don't know that other people have them, and they don't really have any forum to discuss with anything. And I think what makes Dr. Kircher in such a beautiful position here is that she's had the experience, and she is a medical doctor, so she can bring this consciousness to the mainstream. Yeah. Wow. So you had your death experience when you were 6, Dr. Kircher.
Yes,
Was that, I believe I read on your website you had meningitis?
I did. I had meningitis, and that was the physiologic reason that I had a near-death experience.
Wow. Wow, that must be really something. Well, Neville, now you had your death experience when you were 27.
And I was shot to death. So it was very apparent to me I was dead. Not like I was taking my pulse as the body collapsed. But I would just to speak briefly about the reason that I remember very clearly where I went after I died and what happened there. The reason is that I was to come back and write about it and tell about it so that the majority of the human race can get over this obsessive fear of death, because death is a really good idea. As unpopular as that may be in the common culture, it remains a really good idea because it's between lives. There's very little attention paid to what happens in between lives. There is a concept of past lives, which I've watched unfold for 30 years. And 30 years ago, the few books on the market I wasn't going to read because they weren't owning that there were past lives. He would say, I think maybe this person had a past life, and I just close the book and put it and yard sale the book. I'm not interested in that because of the reality of having experienced the death. And very briefly, I met St. Peter, call it the gatekeeper. If you're Egyptian, you're going to meet Anubis. If you're Native American, you're going to meet an elder who has passed. If you're Mormon, you meet Morm himself. I don't know. It depends on the particular affiliation that you have in your thinking. Since Mom was Catholic, it's apparently genetically inherited that I would meet Peter. Call him Peter. Hey, Pete, what's up? And he goes, well, you're dead. And I go, yeah, well, I'm really, and then did the guilty dance. What am I going to do? What's going to happen? And Peter was very kind to show me a tape of 50 lifetimes where this soul and I killed each other off. And at the end of the 50 lifetimes, I was 4 ahead. So I said, well, what's up with that? And the angel said, you've learned the lesson not to seek vendetta, but you have yet to learn the idea of not hating this person. The reason you're 4 ahead, the reason he didn't bump you off, the reason he bumped you off the extra 4 times was that you hated him bumping you off and therefore recreated him bumping you off. What you hate, you recreate. And that was one of many, many lessons I brought back. When I came back to life, it was in the hospital bed. And I was looking at the nurse, and I saw the nurse in a past life, and I saw her in a Civil War past life, as clear as I'm seeing you. And I had died in front of this person during the Civil War, and I had come back to life in front of this person during the latter 20th century. And fait accompli, closed loop tape in time, never a word spoken, but the in-out dance. And just been more conscious, more and more conscious ever since.
You know, that is incredible, because one thing that's across the board, and Dr. Kircher could probably also say this probably better than I, is that across the board, people that have near-death experiences, or Neville puts it a death experience because it really did happen. It wasn't near. It's just you came back from it.
Yeah.
Is that your consciousness gets expanded. It's like once you get out of the box, you're always larger than the box. And so another common thing is that people are driven and compelled And would you find that to be true also, Dr. Kircher? Did you find that that was something that motivated your life after that experience?
I think something of that nature is bound to expand one's consciousness. You can hardly have an experience like that without having that happen. And I think it also gives other people permission to talk about experiences that they've had that have expanded their consciousness that may not have been either, as Neville said, a death experience, or as we in medicine say, a near-death experience. Because there are lots of ways that we get our consciousness expanded.
Well, I can imagine just your work with the hospice board, how this is going to revolutionize care at end-of-life care. What do you find the response from the medical community? Because I know you have been, for the last 16 years, taking this information to the medical profession, and I know that must have been very bold and took a lot of bravery to do that. Have you noticed a lot of change?
Well, I have seen a lot. I have seen a reasonable amount of change, quite a bit of change. I think I haven't seen as much change yet in the medical profession as I have seen in the lay public.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
I remember when I first gave my talk in a medical setting. I did it at the hospital where I was practicing as a family physician, and I was very conscious that I used slides so that I could turn out all the lights and not know how they were reacting. I knew in my heart I needed to do it, and it was probably one of the scariest things I've ever done. And when the lights came back on, I was speaking to the family practice residents at a noon conference, and so I was speaking to the residents and the faculty that was teaching them, and all of the residents were looking to the faculty to see how they should react to such a thing.
Oh, yeah.
And bless their souls, the faculty who had known me for many years, that's where I also did my residency, they thought about it, and they started to ask me about situations that they had had in their practice that they couldn't explain, that they thought, well, maybe this is a near-death experience. So it ended up being a positive experience.
Oh, yeah.
And I was glad I'd started with people who already knew me.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, in terms of how it's changed over time, just to briefly say, now I'm actually invited to medical schools to talk about near-death experience.
Oh, wonderful.
So
That is so
a huge
wonderful.
difference.
Well, you know, also when we start acknowledging, Reverend Myers was saying right before we took the call that, just the premise that our spirit, our essential self continues on, it is so heartwarming, and can you imagine how that would transform a family that are in the midst of having someone cross over? It's just an incredible thing.
Dr. Kircher, good evening. This is Reverend Mary Myers. How are you tonight?
I'm very good, thank you.
It's nice to visit with you. I wanted to bring in another element that I hear us all just about touching on here, and it has a lot to do with the subject that your book that you've written, Love is the Link. It's I know when we're talking about reincarnation, and that we perhaps have repeated chances to balance lessons in our lives, that the common theme, and I think perhaps the relationships that we meet on the other side and the realizations that we come to about our own life as we are on the other side before we come back, especially in a near-death experience, all have the common theme that there is some factor of love that needs to be balanced, and or to make amends, or to forgive, or something. And it seems to me that this is the dynamic that seems to be operating. And one of the philosophies that we do in our metaphysical churches, we work on that we in a more expansive attitude rather than restrictive. We are very inclusive, and basically love is the theme that we all eventually our souls, or whatever you want to call this energy core that we are, come to address as the central motivating force in our energy. And if you could comment on that, Dr. Kircher, because I know that it is a main theme of what your speaking is.
Yes, and certainly every aspect of the near-death experience is about learning about love. Even sometimes people are hesitant when they hear about a life review, but even in the life review, it's just about, well, this was a place I had an opportunity to love, and I didn't perhaps take it in that moment, but the next time I can, because now I know I want to.
Yeah.
And I think that the near-death experience really just put that fire in people to at least consider the possibility of love in every moment.
You know, that is so beautiful, because love is the gas pedal and non-love is just the brake on love. And Neville, you had an...
Yeah, very, very, this is, I really hear what you're saying here. When I was shot to death, I was shown tapes of 50 lifetimes where I danced with the soul that had taken my life. And I'll sum them up. I killed him, he killed me. I killed him, he killed me, I killed him, he killed me, I killed him. And as I said, at the end, I'm 4 ahead. And after I had seen this tape, I was still in a state of confusion. And then I was shown another tape, which was presented to me as the probability of what would happen if I chose to reanimate my body, which would include this television program, which would include many, many of my life's experiences. And when I was done being shown that tape, I declared my love for the person that had murdered me that many times, because when you murder someone, you take on a boatload of debris into your auric field. You really, truly do. You cannot be the same after such an experience. And what a kind and noble person that being was, to have killed me, taken on that much debris, so that I could feel a true love for this other soul, which ended any further lives where we would be killing each other. In fact, any further lives where I would be involved with killing or being killed. From that moment on, I was so far ahead of the game, and came back with that and have been teaching it for 30 years.
Well, you know, and that also, if we look at love as being the gas pedal, the movement forward, and non-love being the brake pedal, the forgiveness is the foot that takes it off the brake. And so you forgave him and you forgave yourself.
Absolutely love him.
Which non-forgiveness is the hook that keeps things tied to each other. And so forgiveness, which is the reanimation of love, is absolutely the key.
Yeah.
And, you know, forgiving ourselves is essential, you know, to
Loving
get that love
yourself.
flowing.
Yeah, loving
We're
yourself
all
does
using
away
the
with guilt.
same words. One of our principles says soul is an individual is never unable to reform itself here or hereafter. And from what he has said, he was attempting to reform, and this other entity that you were involved with that was one and one and one and one and doing it back and forth to each other, that's called reformation, an ability to kind of expand to your own conscious recognition of what your journey is about, and no personality I hear in there lecturing you or chastising you. You came to that realization upon your own consciousness.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Time after time after time.
Bingo. I mean, that is a very, very good observation there.
Yes.
And it was in fact the hatred that kept the engine, you know, because I was not bumping him off and then him bumping me off.
Somehow
after
the
that
hatred
point.
stopped.
Right, when I recognized that I loved this soul for the amount of effort expended on my behalf.
Yes.
Because
in
you
order
opened
to-
your eyes and saw really what was there instead of the illusion of what you thought was there.
Yeah.
Yes. Very interesting.
Yeah, very
Yeah,
good.
Seeing through the illusion is the nature of it.
Perhaps Dr. Kircher could tell, in her presentation, does she just speak, or do
Yeah.
other people talk, and what is the common experience that you have with people in the audience?
Well, when I meet with people, I like to give a talk at the beginning so that as I put it on the same page, so that I give some of the factual, some of the science behind the near-death experience research that's been done. And then what I like to do is to just have a dialogue with who showed up. Because I know that anybody who comes to a talk like mine has questions. They may have things they want to share with other people. And it's a beautiful opportunity for us to all share with each other. So I find that by far the most powerful part of our being together.
Oh, absolutely, because when we truly hear is when we can speak and have that mirrored back through someone else, and so that is a wonderful thing. Now, where is this going to take place, Mary?
Okay, it's going to be in a denominationally neutral spot at Kenmore. Kenmore Middle School is right at the intersection of Route 50, which is a major highway here in the area, Route 50 and Carlin Springs Road. The address is 200 Carlin Springs. The tickets will be available at the door, or you can call the number that you see on your screen, and I'll mail them to you right away. And groups of 4 or more have a discount rate of $20 each person. And the other tickets after the 17th are going to be $25. And so the tickets are $20 until then. And we'd be very happy to mail the tickets right to you. We will be taking your personal check or MasterCard or Visa. And Dr. Kircher is going to be available for 2 hours at that time. And she's also going to have her books that she is making available for sale, and she'll be available to sign those books too. So,
And this would be March 5th.
March 5th, Sunday afternoon, from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
And it's a wonderful opportunity
Yeah.
because I believe Dr. Kircher does not make it to the area very often. So
No,
this
she's
would
coming
be
all the way from Colorado.
Yeah, and that's
Several
correct.
groups have called and tried to have her come to their place also, and I said, oh, well, I think that you better come over to ours first, and then, so.
Yeah, well, it is such an interesting topic. And now you sit on the advisory board with hospice, Dr. Kircher. What is
Yes.
that like?
Well, I sit on the advisory board now, and I have worked as the hospice physician in an inpatient unit.
Oh, wow.
So,
wow.
So I've done hospice work for the last 15 years. Sometimes working in the inpatient unit, sometimes working in patients' homes, and currently I'm serving on the advisory board. And so it's interesting right now because there is a real move toward having end-of-life care in hospitals, not as hospice being separate,
Yes.
but it's having that be part of patient choice.
Well, you know, this is very much like midwife, but for birth in the other direction, birth into the afterlife. And it is such a neglected thing. And in the 1950s on, or even earlier than that, death became something so far removed from us that you disappeared in a hospital and you just never came home. And it was all hush-hush. You couldn't ever go around and be with the person as it happens. This is as important of a thing as birth is, and it's just really about time that it's coming part of something that everybody is aware of. I mean, there are so many incredible stories. My sister, who is no longer in this earth plane with us, but is with us in spirit, she was a critical care nurse for 20 years, and she had so many experiences, and she was very conscious and very loving to people who were crossing. She understood a lot more because she was similar beliefs to my own. She told me one time that just to show you the power of our spirit, she was the nurse that revived people, the charge nurse, or I forget what they call them, that did the crash cart. And she said this guy was in a coma or really, really ill, and his wife sat by him for 3 weeks and never went home, and all the medical staff talked her into going home and showering. Oh, he's going to be stable. As soon as she leaves, the guy codes. And they, they were doing all their procedures because he had passed away, and my sister was getting him ready to be taken downstairs, and she detected a pulse in his foot. And they were all like, oh my gosh, what can I tell her when she comes back? You know, they all felt so bad telling her to leave. And 9 minutes after death was declared, his pulse started beating again, and he started gaining respiration, and he was brain dead, technically. But he waited for her to come back. She came back and he passed away for good 2 hours later. So it shows you even when our body may not be receptive to life coming back in it, it is still viable, and our spirit is so strong it can come back to wait for her to come to be with him.
Yes, ancient
And in that
peoples.
same vein, I know I want to make sure that your audience knows this as well, and that is I've had several patients whose loved ones were just like this wife who sat by him for 3 weeks, and she left for 10 minutes to go get a cup of coffee, and that was when he died. And I believe that they actually, that there is some consciousness, even in a person who's comatose,
Absolutely.
to know that he wanted to do it when she wasn't there.
That, one quick thing.
Yeah, he wanted to do it privately.
He wanted to do it
Absolutely.
privately.
Or save for that, who knows what the reasoning was, but I think it's not just
There
a
was
coincidence.
reasoning there.
Yeah. Well, I have done a number of readings for people that are having loved ones like across the United States that are close, and they come and they're torn, like, do I go or do I not? And I said, if you are supposed to be there, you will be there. And if you're not, as soon as you go to the bathroom, that'll be when it happens.
Yeah.
And you are exactly right. Thanks for bringing that up, because that is very healing for all the people that think they were not there and they should have been.
Right.
That it's impossible not to be there when you're supposed to, and to be there when you're not
You
supposed
cannot,
to.
there's no such thing as late. It isn't even a real word. One point I'd like to make is eventually mankind will recognize death as a celebration.
Yes.
It's very important that it be celebrated. The original idea of the wake has somehow been swept away by the artificial sorrow that's created. If you wish to tell your story about the babysitter
Yes.
and the fact that you were educated.
When I
so
was
please.
3.5 or 4 years old, the lady that was babysitting me died. She had a stroke. And I being that young, and I was alone with her, and I saw this happen, and I was not afraid at all. I just knew that was something natural. I just said, Louise died. And I walked and I found somebody, and I thought it was fine. And then my mother cried, and we went to the funeral, and everybody was crying, and I remember standing in an elevator, very, very tiny, trying to make my eyes cry, because I thought, I don't understand why people are crying.
Yeah.
Because
why
it
would
just
you?
seems so natural to me.
Yeah.
And I remember learning grief.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Right.
it's an artificial construct. It's not our natural state. Grief was never a natural state. And this whole mythos that's set up for us to be so upset about something that we could very well be celebrating. Because the person who is dead is better off. This is first-hand experience. I came back because I wanted to finish the ride. But that was it. I mean, I came back to do what that tape told me I would probably be doing. I came back to have fun. That's why I came back.
Well, we explored the new world, and now we explored space. Now we're exploring after death, and we have these pioneers like you and Dr. Kircher that come back to let us know what it
In
is like.
between life.
Yeah.
Dr. Kircher, do you find that people who have had this experience come back with some sort of an agenda? That they seem to be more focused in their life pattern?
I think it's an interesting juxtaposition in that people do want to, quote, finish the ride. I love that now.
I paid the money. I'm going for
it
the
is
ride.
a ride. It's that life isn't taken so seriously because you know it isn't the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that one piece, and then as to whether or not there are agendas, some people come back thinking that there are specific things to do, like you were saying, starting the television show. Other people come back with a more general sense that being loving in every moment is their goal, and the actual details of life don't matter so much. So I don't think there's one way to come back.
That's so true. That's so true. My original, when I was born with my umbilical cord around my neck, and so when I came out, they had to resuscitate me. I was completely blue. And my whole life, I came in with conscious memories of my past lives, and I do remember my birth, and I have a memory that extends all the way back to my birth. And I know that came in I brought that in purposefully so that I could explore being conscious of the other reality. And you're right, each one of these is so unique and so different.
Well, you merged with your higher self at the moment of your birth. That's why you have that memory track in there. There have only been, to my knowledge, 2 books ever published on the subject of what happens between lives. Albert Brooks notwithstanding.
Yeah, that's
Judgment City.
you're referring to the Defending Your Life, that movie, which is a
Right.
very, very interesting
yes.
movie.
And there's the 2 books. One's called The Unquiet Dead, and which was published, and I forget the company, by Dr. Edith Fiore, published The Unquiet Dead. And there was another book, self-published, called So You're Dead. that dealt with the in-between land. And that's what's very interesting to me, what experiences people have between lifetimes. When we take people into past lives, it's very important to take a look at what happens between the lives, because it's between the lives that you are your higher self, that there's a greater connection than you usually make in your conscious mind with, as I said, you merged with your higher self at the moment of your birth. And that's why this path unfolded for you. That's the way that works. But it's very curious
Reverend Myers,
to know.
what is your thoughts on between lives?
Well, while you've been talking here, I was wondering about Dr. Kubler-Ross, the work that she did and the work that Dr. Kircher is doing, and how they are similar or different. And past lives, you know, I hesitate to go into this so excitedly, because this is, our denomination is really geared toward ministering and demonstrating that there is life after the change most people call death. And Reverend Brown is very, very excited about this sort of work, that we are going to help highlight it, because he says he has people call him, professionals call him from the hospital, nurses and even relatives they call up and they say, Reverend Brown, what do I do? Mom or Dad's getting ready to die. What am I going to do? And he said, well, let him go, you know.
Yeah.
Celebrate.
And one of the things that we are able to do is demonstrate by setting up a channeling between entities that are still there, all around us with much love, and the communication back. People that we have known in our lifetimes, guides and teachers that help us progress in our own spiritual path. And part of that work that is done is about communication. And one of the entities I just heard last week said that he had been what we would call the Civil War epic in our country. He had been born in Vermont, and he had a wonderful life. We can authenticate his life here historically. We know what he did, and he did. He was a wonderful person. He continues to be a great guide and teacher. And he said that if he had the choice to come back and reincarnate and do a physical life again, the only reason he would do it would be that the dying was so wonderful.
Well,
and he called that the highlight of the living, was the wonderful experience of dying.
well, you know
exactly.
that in the Jane Roberts book, Seth talked about it's far easier to die than it is to be born. We had a friend that passed not all that long ago, and we were ringing this big quartz crystal bowl and having a little ceremony, you know, to send her off. And she came to me very clearly, and I could hear her, and I says, well, what is it like to actually die? And she says, imagine that bowl is filled with water and your face is in it, and you're looking around trying to see what's going on, and then imagine pulling your face out and taking a deep breath. She goes, that's what it feels like to die, you know, to be like, this life is like looking in a fishbowl, and that is the expansiveness of death.
Well, a lot of souls decide that they like it between lifetimes, and then they have to be coaxed back into incarnation. I'm very serious about that. And there's very little writing on this anywhere, because once you're out of this, well, we with oppositional personality disorder, as long as we're alive, we want to be in the in-between land, and once we're in the in-between land, we want to be live again. So we're never happy where we are. We go back and forth. Mentally, whether or not we do physically is another question, but if you want to just stroke your eyebrow, and you see how good that feels, believe it or not, that is one of the incentives to incarnate. That very movement, that very play.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, isn't that an interesting one? That's through Hilarion, was channeled in Canada.
Interesting.
But yeah,
well,
the
one thing that
sensuality of
I'd like to,
sensory.
that Reverend Myers brought up, that I'd like to get Dr. Kircher's point of view on too, is that the letting go thing. It came to me a long time ago. I was riding on the street. You know how sometimes when people have car accidents, they leave little memorials by the side of the road. And I heard so clearly when I drove past that is not necessarily the optimal thing to do, because what you're doing is calling attention to that instead of their life. And our grief makes it very difficult, because when we cross, we don't want our loved ones to be sad, because that does keep us from going and exploring who we really are. And so that is a very important point to bring up.
We have a ritual, a sort of ritual prayer that we do at in Divine Metaphysics, and it's called a prayer of progression. And usually, when we're getting ready to go into the sanctuary to do a service, somebody will come up with a card with information written on it and say, "Will you please do a prayer of progression?" And basically, the prayer is guiding the congregation or those individuals into releasing from overstrong emotions that tend to bind, especially anger and hatred and a sense of regret or grief of things not done. And you'll find that especially in relationships that express back, that is the work they're trying to unbind, because we believe that the individual identity does progress in knowing and growing, and I don't know what other planes we do that on, but many other planes there are. And I am convinced that this is the most constructive, loving work and ministerial work that we can do, rather than hold out hope for people that there might be life after death, and that it depends on certain rules that you do or you don't do, and judgments and punishments. It's not like that at all. It's that the energy goes on, and those overstrong regrets or undone things have to be worked on before the love work can go ahead.
Superstitions.
Well, Dr. Kircher, did they have? Are you aware of any kind of movement in the medical profession to kind of spend some focus on the family of people that are crossing?
Well, certainly, it's been an interesting conversation this last few minutes. Certainly in hospice, very much people focus on the family as well as the person who's dying. And that's also true in palliative care in the hospital as well. And I think that in general, the medical profession is much more aware of the need to address the family issues than they were, say, 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But I'd like to add a couple of comments on what I've heard lately, and one of them is that we all know that not everyone dies in great joy, and that sometimes people have a very difficult time letting go.
Yeah.
And especially if they have pain or if they have those issues of forgiveness.
Yes.
And it helps for any of us at any time in life, even if we're not even close to death, the more we've worked on those forgiveness issues, the easier it is to let go when we're at the moment of death.
Oh gosh, you just that gave me chills. That is so to the point. You know, in the Toltec teaching is to do your recapitulation, where you go over your life. You know, the story of when your life passing before your eyes. You know, where we would hear about that when we were younger. That is very true, because the things that we have not let go of are what we call karma. That just means it's unfinished business, and the more business you can finish, then death is your best friend and rides on your left shoulder. And you are, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose, meaning you have nothing to lose. Then freedom, is you can just go when you're ready to go, because we are designed to have conscious death, like the mutant message from Down Under in that book.
Quite a bit of information comes through there. Since I was shot to death, there has not been a single day that I was not prepared to die.
Yeah, that's a big thing right
not
there.
a single day, not even the thought of it. If someone came at me with a gun right now, I go, here. You're telling me my mission's over? You're telling me I get to go home? Here, shoot, aim, carefully, aim.
So the attitude toward the change is completely different than it was before.
No, I had no opinion before. I didn't think about it before. It wasn't,
but the fear level has
I don't
gone,
think I would.
vanished.
Yeah, I have zero fear of it. I believe I had very little fear of it to begin with, but I have absolutely no fear of death, none whatsoever. Therefore, I'm guaranteed to live to 260.
But you know what? Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I think underneath that, not having a fear of death is really it lets you see, well, what makes me fear death? Number one is not
Ignorance.
knowing that there's something
yeah.
that continues on. Number two is unfinished business here.
Yeah.
People, don't want to leave your kids, haven't done your will yet. It's all stuff that you haven't dealt with, and if you deal with that, the fear of death just goes away.
And that's why this great work that professionals like Dr. Kircher are now doing, and Dr. Kubler-Ross did, and the metaphysical philosophy, understanding that helps people relax a little bit about life and realize that even suicide is not an answer. It is not a viable choice. It is a choice. It's absolutely a choice. But so many things are left unfinished. And I think people are misguided in thinking that, there's a recent news story that's just breaking now that we all are being led to think that this person may have been under such depression that he decided perhaps that he was going to take his own life because he just didn't want to go on. Well, the choices don't end there. I mean, you still have the issues to deal with, and so you might as well deal with these things because you are going to have to, whether you're here or on the other side.
Yeah.
Well, you brought up Groundhog Day.
I did.
Have you seen the movie?
Groundhog Day is a great teaching about
teaching.
past lives, if you look
Yeah.
at it in those terms.
He committed suicide 18, 19 times right in the middle of the movie. Every day he would get up, kill himself. Every day he'd
Yes,
get
that's
up,
right.
kill himself. Every day he'd get up, kill himself. It sunk in on him that wasn't the answer.
Well,
So it doesn't matter if somebody suicides.
great.
It's a
You brought up-
non-issue.
That's great to say.
you know,
It's a
you-
non-issue.
Yeah, it is a non-issue. But you brought up an interesting point too, because about these opportunities to go and making new decisions, because we do create our own reality, and if that's true here, then it's true on the other side as well. I had an experience when I was in my 20s, or actually in my early 30s. I had always gotten this feeling that I was going to die by the time I was 36. And I never thought about it, but when I was young, I would do like divination things and it would say that, and it was a little weird. And one night I was driving home from this event where I was speaking at this women's group thing, and I was on this very narrow road and a car comes at me very, very fast, and there was nowhere for me to pull over. And in a flash, I started realizing, I remember. It just slowed down, and I had recollection of seeing that I was not going to live past 36. And I said, no, I changed my mind. I decide I will live longer. And at that moment, I was in perfect union with my higher self. And that car that was screeching, we were both screeching, all of a sudden it was complete silence, and the car lifts up and moves over and floats past me. And both of us just stared. I remember the young man's face. He had a goatee. It was a GTO. And we were like, and you hear this, and I come back into reality, and our cars are just stopped, and neither of us could even move for a moment. It was so shocking. And it was literally a shift in reality. And I have heard a lot of people, and not a lot, I have heard people speak of this and write of this, these opportunities that we take or not take. I was wondering if anybody here has any opinion on that.
Jump right in here, Dr. Kircher.
About opportunities that may be taken or not taken.
I can't remember where I've read it, but it makes sense to me that we have different exit points that we might have, and there's a kind of a probability that certain exit points will happen. But it's not. We still have that free will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
free will, exactly.
Yeah.
You can call your
so
exit
it sounds like that's
anytime.
exactly what happened for you
Yeah.
in that moment.
It's not-
Talking about deciding to stay or go, now it has been my personal experience that I had a terrible head injury, and my husband was with me when it happened, and I was unconscious, and then I was in a coma for about 5 days. But during that period of time, I am told that there are certain people that I trust their opinion, and said that I was making a decision at the time whether to stay or to go. And that very good friend of mine, happened to be Reverend Brown, gathered my family around my bed and said, "Come here, you people, she's trying to make a decision." And the group did a prayer around me, and shortly, within the next day or so, I did come back to consciousness. I don't remember any of that experience. And I always felt, Dr. Kirsch, you might input on this. I always felt robbed that I never remembered any of the details of my near-death experience or decision process. And I have been led to believe that I was caused to not remember it because there were certain agenda things that I set up at the time in that interim of making a decision that I have to just naturally work through and progress through rather than getting it all done real quick. So do you have any comment about that? Is that common where people, you know, have a death experience and come back, but they don't have memory of the details?
I think it's extraordinarily common. I'm being led in two directions here. One of them is that people remember clearly that there was something very specific, but they cannot remember what the very specific something was. So that is quite common.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing on that same category is people in comas often don't remember a near-death experience. But I have known several people who, of course, with a coma, you don't remember anything from the time of the trauma for quite a long while, and sometimes there's a retrograde amnesia, meaning even before the trauma, because of the way the brain works for memory.
Mm-hmm.
That these people would go to have some hypnotherapy to try to at least shorten that period of amnesia so that they could just feel, you know, like there wasn't such a gap in their lives. And to their surprise, in the hypnotherapy session, they would remember an NDE
Very
that
interesting.
happened during that coma, that wasn't really why they went, but that's what they got.
That is
It's,
very interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe it's just your exploration of remembering that is on your path for you to learn. What were
Well,
you
all
saying?
I can do is look back at my life since that moment, and my ministry has really found its focus, and I have become, you know, happier and happier person because of my ministry now and the people I work with there at the chapel and in the denomination. But
That's
so I assume that's what it was about.
Yeah, the reasons why, I remember absolutely everything that happened from the moment of the gun being pulled on me until, I remember absolutely everything that happened when I was on the other side, every detail, every nuance, completely. It's written in the hidden language codes.
Yes,
It's
it
the
is.
introduction
Yes, and I highly
to
recommend
Very
the
well.
language codes and the hidden language codes by
codes.
R. Neville Johnston. That's
Yeah.
available
Yes.
at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and
the book. And
various places.
the more I read as an adult 30-something years later after the experience, the more I read, people are just now talking about merging their higher consciousness with their consciousness. That's what happened instantly when I was dead. I was my higher consciousness as soon as one of the angels said, just chill. And I got over the guilty dance that we were taught to do. The fear and words that aren't real words. There's no such thing as regret. You just aren't recognizing the blessing.
Wow.
And there's,
Wow.
you are constantly talking to God. The idea of prayer as being a separate thing. Yeah, the being your higher self is the whole deal there, and that's
Yeah.
what, and I think I'm just going to write another book on just the in-between. I'll
I
research
think it
with
would,
some other
well, you
people.
know, maybe that's what you're being led to do. But
Yeah.
it's amazing, you know, when we do look at the universe and everything is being perfect and everything happening for a very specific reason, that it's not random. Just even when we don't remember, just the path to going along that path to say, let me remember this, is an unfoldment. And oftentimes, too, we may not remember things because things are so large that they can't fit into our life at the moment. And so we encounter them either in dreams, like Reverend Myers and I were talking before the show, and I've had a few instances where my body, you know, when I was giving childbirth and things like that, but my most profound experience relating to death was in the dream, where I was really shown what the process is, how we die and where we go, and that nothing really changes on our consciousness level. And so it can happen within the coma, like Dr. Kircher was talking about, people going back in regressions. I think that hypnosis, that's really interesting to me. I've never heard of that.
Well, that's a very common human principle. You hear the same piece of information from 175 people over a period of 10 years, then all of a sudden somebody says it, and you go, oh, yeah, of course.
That happens a lot.
Right, and so never to take that personally. It doesn't matter how many times you tell anything to anyone, they are going to have to hear it a number of times before they build
Yes.
the room
Oh,
in their
yeah.
head to
That is
have
so
the
true.
experience.
Yes.
So how many of us
Excellent point.
actually remember having seen a flying saucer? And I said, actually remember, not did you see a flying saucer? Because there are very few humans that haven't seen flying saucers. Very few people that haven't seen flying saucers.
Well, you're
It's
right,
having a
because
place in your head.
I call our brain just a vibrational interpreter, because everything really is vibration, and
Yes,
we only
absolutely.
perceive what we believe
Absolutely.
in. Yeah.
Higher and lower vibration.
Yeah,
Wow.
that is the way that works.
Well, let's maybe just mention the number again of where you can call to get tickets for this event on March 5th. I highly recommend going. I think you would have a wonderful time. Dr. Kircher is very wonderful. Lots of very fun things to impart. And the number is 540, and it's been up several times, but I'll just speak it too in case you're more auditory. So 540-554-2098, which you can call for tickets. Yes.
Also call Arlington Metaphysical Chapel at 703-276-8738, and they'll be glad to give information too.
And speaking of, Neville and I will be at Arlington Metaphysical Chapel in April, I believe.
They are very
doing-
popular teachers, and we're very
love it
glad
over
to
there.
have you
We
there.
just love it over there. And doing a divination tools, which we'll discuss palmistry, face reading, tea leaf reading, pendulums, divining rods, I Ching, and the runes, give you an introduction to all these
Seeing
different things.
through the illusion.
Find a way to get, find what tool speaks to you to talk to your higher self.
We believe that Spirit is always looking for some vocabulary to help communicate with us and help us. And anything that, the longer we go, the more we find we are becoming more inclusive in the philosophies of the world, and all truth is truth, and some of it just speaks, like you said before, to us more strongly than the others, and it's all inclusive, not exclusive.
I love
the broader we get, the higher energy, the higher the vibration.
I've always said that belief systems are like bubbles, and the more bubbles you can include in yours, the better off, because we're
Yes.
to get
I-
more
More
expansive.
expansive.
Definitely met
And
some
the more-
truths with a big mouth.
Wow. Well, this has just is continuing to be an incredibly interesting conversation. Dr. Kircher, is there anything that you would like to say? I believe we're down to about our last 5 minutes or so of the show. Is there
Well,
anything?
A couple of things, if I may.
Sure.
One of them is that I recognize that healthcare professionals haven't really always known how to be helpful to people who've had near-death experiences. And that's one of the things that I definitely want to talk about, because I've had a lot of experience with that, and I'm sure that some of the people who've had near-death experiences haven't always had positive experiences with their doctors.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that's going to become something that is a thing of the past.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, so this talk you're doing will then be perfect also for medical professionals, nurses, people that deal with that, right? Because I know we are really close to Arlington Hospital here, and I know a number of our viewers are working in the medical field.
And
So
the
this-
hospice organization.
Yeah, and the hospice is right nearby here too.
I agree.
Yes,
I had to be reclusive for a year after I was shot. I just
Yeah.
couldn't talk to
Oh,
people.
yeah.
Especially seminaries and chaplains also.
Oh,
need
yes.
to be in.
And so, along with talking about people who've had near-death experiences, I'll also be talking and be available for questions about working with people who are dying and the kinds of expanded consciousness that people have who are dying, and also the communications that people who have died come back and give to their loved ones.
Wow, that is so beautiful.
We really appreciate you coming, Dr. Kircher.
Yes, thank you so much. And Dr. Kircher's website is Pam Kircher, which is PAMKIRCHER.com, and it has a lot about what she does. And I found it very interesting. I read it the other day, and I found it very interesting. And she also does Tai Chi, which is a wonderful little mix of spices you have in your cabinet there. So I'd like to thank you so much for being on our show. Our show can be watched every Friday, 8:30, on Channel 69 here in Arlington. And you can also, not this particular show, but another show that we do, you can see on our website, telepathictv.com, and see some of the things we do. You can also check out Neville Johnston's book, Hidden Language Codes, his new book, and Dr. Kircher's new book, which is called
Love is the Link.
Love is the Link. So, well, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us, and we'll go ahead and,
Thank you for having
say
us.
goodbye to Dr. Kircher. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Kircher.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, it's
Bye.
been our joy. Thank you. All right. And Neville, did you?
Very well done. No, just death is not to be feared.
Yes,
obviously.
Yeah, and this superstition that we're taught from the reason
Fear.
for the language codes book is to stop to do away with these words. That if you think with the word tragedy, oh, that'll describe something, but that wasn't actually a tragedy. That was a lot of people advancing exponentially in a very small amount of time. There is no such thing as a tragedy. There is just advance. There is nothing. We move
Yes.
forward, and we don't do
Yeah.
anything else.
That's very good, and what a wonderful note to
Amen.
be winding up on.
Mhm.
And
Thank you
Reverend
so
Myers,
much for
thank you
having
so
us.
much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
We've
Yeah.
been wanting
Very
You're
to,
good.
to have you on
Yes, thank you.
for the longest time, and it was just very lovely.
Yes,
And thank you
yes,
so
yes.
much. And Reverend Myers is with Arlington Metaphysical Chapel here in Arlington.
And Reverend F. Reed Brown is the head pastor.
And I believe probably our audience, we had Reverend Brown and Reverend Tador on not long ago. So
A lot of people are
getting everybody.
familiar with ANC
yes, and you
through
can
this
check
show.
out telepathictv.com. You can see a list of the classes we're doing. We've got one on crystals, minerals, and how to heal with crystals coming up. And I believe Osho Zen Tarot, a past life
dreams, I
workshop, and probably a dreams coming up soon. I don't
Hidden
even know, but
language
it's all
codes
on there.
workshop.
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah.
the things that you're
So
doing.
let's just, yeah, maybe we can all just take a few moments and send peace energies to the world so that we can make our hearts be known about what our intentions are. Bye-bye.